Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our Q&A on the AES Indiana Rate Hike. We are with your Citizens Action Coalition, a nonprofit that's been fighting for fair utility rates in Indiana since 1974. My name's Kelly. I've been with CAC for about 10 years now, and I'm the Director of Development. So I help get folks engaged in our work for affordable utilities and a cleaner environment. I'll be asking questions today, and we, of course, have some more members of our awesome CAC team here to help us out with this Q&A. I'd love to hear who you are and what you do here at CAC. Laura?
My name is Laura Susak. I started working at CAC in 1996, so I've been around for a minute. I am the Director of Outreach and Operations, and that means that I basically work in the background and keep things running smoothly for the most part. So, Ben?
Hi, I'm Ben Inskeep. I'm Program Director at Citizens Action Coalition. I joined a year and a half ago, and I'm primarily working on expert witness testimony for CAC, including I'll be filing our testimony in the AES Indiana rate case. Jen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Ben. I'm Jennifer Washburn, Regulatory Director for Citizens Action Coalition. I'm CAC's in-house attorney. I am representing CAC before the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission. I've been with CAC for 11 years now. Kerwin?
Yeah, hello, everybody. Kerwin Olson. I'm the Executive Director at Citizens Action Coalition. Obviously, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the company, responsible for day-to-day operations and governance and those sort of things. But I'm also our Chief Policy spokesperson at the Indiana State House. And I've been with CAC now for 18 years.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for all you do. And thanks, of course, for being here today so we can learn more about this AES Indiana rate hike. And Ben, you are up first. We're here because AES Indiana says they want a rate hike of about $17 a month. But our math shows that the rate hike is actually more like $23 a month. Why are they misleading customers?
That's right. When a utility files a rate case before the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, they will typically estimate how much that rate increase is going to affect residential customers. In this case, they did say that the rate increase was going to affect the typical customer by about $17 a month. Of course, bills vary from customer to customer, so your impact will vary. But when we went to double check their math, we weren't getting the same answer. And so we were really confused. How are they getting the $17 a month? We did a lot of digging, and it turns out that AES is basing that comparison by looking back not at what our current rates are today, but what the rates were last year when electricity prices soared during the Ukrainian invasion from Russia. We saw a lot of electricity prices and energy prices around the world spike, and that resulted in really, really high energy prices last year. You might remember that yourself from filling up your gas tank in the middle of the summer last year when gas was over $5 a gallon. Same thing kind of happened on the electricity side of the equation, where our rates went up last year across the state. Rates have since gone down a little bit. And so when we look at our rates today, as AES Indiana customers, we're paying a little bit less than we were last year. So when we're looking at this rate case here and trying to figure out how is this actually going to impact customers going forward, what we think is a fair comparison is to say how much rates your bill is going to go up based on what you're currently paying, not based on what rates were 12 months ago, 18 months ago, but today. So unfortunately, that means this rate case, if it is approved by our commission, it would result in more than a $23 a month rate increase for a family here in Indianapolis.
Thank you so much for clarifying that, Ben. And that brings us to Jen next. Just because AES is asking for a $23 a month increase doesn't mean that's necessarily exactly what they'll get. Rate cases are really lengthy legal proceedings. Please walk us through what happens throughout the rate case process.
Sure. So during a rate case process, large utilities, they are regulated by the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, or the IURC. The IURC serves as the judge and jury in rate case proceedings. Before the utility can charge you new rates, they must file this request before the IURC, and the IURC has the authority to approve, deny, or modify what the utility is requesting. The utility presents its rate request through attorneys and expert witnesses, and then various customer groups in turn will present their positions on each request and any other relevant issue raised. Utilities are natural monopolies, meaning you can't choose a new electric provider even if you wanted to. The fact that utilities are a natural monopoly means they have an added layer of responsibility and public interest that they must answer to. And because the monopoly eliminates that competitive environment, since they are the only show in town, that requires a regulator to protect the consumer and balance the interests of the utility with the consumer. Most utilities, electric, gas, water, wastewater, have customer classifications of residential, commercial, small commercial, large commercial, industrial, sale for resale, other public entities. And CAC, we primarily work on behalf of residential customers, trying to keep your rate for your home at an affordable level. Other groups can intervene and participate in these cases. In a typical rate case, you will see the requesting utility who wants the rate hike or decrease, but we don't see that very much. The Indiana Office of Utility Consumer Counselor, who is the state agency separate from the IURC, with their own attorneys and technical experts who participate in IURC cases on behalf of customer interests. You will see industrial groups and certain commercial customers like Walmart or Kroger, and then groups like ours who represent residential customer and environmental interests. And the process is lengthy. It takes almost a year. Here, AES filed its rate case in late June, and consumer parties will use the next few months to continue asking discovery questions to the utility and clarifying what they're asking for. And then we will file our testimony on the proposal on October 12th. The utility can then file rebuttal testimony on November 8th, and then we have a hearing setting that is set to start on December 4th. During that hearing, we will cross-examine witnesses and otherwise conduct the case. And then afterwards, we'll do post-hearing written submissions to summarize everything and argue our points before the commission. One shocking item in the AES rate case is the amount proposed for attorneys and experts to prepare and work just on this case. AES is proposing nearly $5 million. And that's something that's just always been with their attorney fees at $1.9 million. And that's always been something that I've found so perverse in this space, is that customers are paying the utility for high-priced, top-dollar lawyers to protect the utility from the customers. I've always found that very puzzling and unfair, and we'll be asking the commission to limit those various fees.
Thank you so much, Jen. It does sound just like a very long process with a lot of moving parts. So appreciate that. And Kerwin, pivoting to you, $23 a month seems like a pretty steep rate hike. Can customers afford this?
No. To answer your question, Kelly, they absolutely cannot. I mean, not only do we have, what CAC would characterize as an affordability crisis, we have, thousands of households in the city of Indianapolis on a daily basis struggling to make ends meet, making really inhumane, immoral choices between food, housing, paying utility bills, picking up prescriptions, other healthcare needs. And no, Indianapolis customers simply cannot afford any increase whatsoever, especially from a company that is repeatedly sending over 65,000 disconnect notices to customers on a monthly basis. Imagine that, over 60,000 disconnect notices every month being sent out by AES, and they lead the state in terms of the actual number of disconnections. So we can see from what limited data we do have to this point that AES customers in Indianapolis are struggling to afford their monthly bills on an ongoing basis. If they could afford their existing bills, there wouldn't be over 60,000 every month receiving a disconnect notice with that stress and that fear that comes along with getting a disconnection notice. So absolutely not. This rate increase is unwarranted, way too high, and the customers in Indianapolis simply cannot afford to pay this high price.
Significant, very significant. And it is tough to go without power, and it's tough to be behind on bills. And speaking of folks losing access to electricity, Ben, about 80,000 AES customers were without power at the end of June, and thousands remained without power for days. There have also been additional outages over the course of July. Didn't AES get a big rate hike back in 2020 to improve their grid? And why were folks without power for so long?
Yeah, that's exactly right. AES did get a very large rate increase just a few years ago. It's $1.2 billion they were authorized to spend on grid improvements, supposedly to help prevent this type of thing from happening, help increase reliability and resiliency. When we look at just how much they've been spending on transmission and distribution, the grid, if you will, over the past 5 years, we've seen that amount increase by 134%. So massive increase in how much they're spending on the grid, telling us they need to do it for reliability reasons. We've seen them increase the amount of money they're spending on tree trimming as well over the past few years. So we're kind of scratching our heads of why it took them just so long to reconnect customers when we were hit with that storm at the end of June, and why come 4th of July, people were still without power. So we have teamed up with Indiana's ratepayer advocate, the Office of Utility Consumer Counselor, and have asked formally to the commission to open an investigation just so we can make sure that what AES did was consistent with their plans, and what any lessons that we can learn from this we can apply going forward. Make sure that they did everything possible to both prepare for the storm, and then when the storm hit, to get customers reconnected as quickly as possible. So we do encourage folks, if you were impacted significantly, if you lost food from your fridge and it spoiled, or if you had other impacts, please do feel free to go to the commission's website. You can file a formal complaint. Please let the commission know how you were impacted, and we can make sure we can get a fair outcome from this unfortunate situation.
Thank you, Ben. And as folks struggled with these outages and reacted to the proposed rate hike, we saw a lot of folks on social media saying things were better under IPL, or Indianapolis Power and Light. Kerwin, when did AES acquire IPL?
Well, AES acquired IPL back in 2001, but just recently in the last few years officially changed the name to AES Indiana. And folks should be aware that Dayton Power and Light is also owned by AES. So there are two U.S. affiliates of the rather large global corporation that is AES in the United States, with AES Ohio in Dayton and AES Indiana here in Indianapolis. And what we have seen is a significant escalation in AES Indiana bills in recent years, 34% over the last 10 years. And what we have believed at Citizens Action Coalition, and others share this view, is that AES is a large energy holding company, and AES Indiana, and probably the same is true of AES Ohio, are just cash cows for this large energy global corporation headquartered in Arlington, Virginia, out of state, that as a utility in a very, very friendly state with a friendly utility regulatory commission, a friendly legislative body. And really, they are just using the company, from our perspective, as nothing more than a cash cow to send those earnings up to the holding company and to their shareholders. And that's been a concern for us, because that seems to be the primary motivation, is that fiduciary responsibility that they have to their global investors. And that loses focus. The farther away you get from customers, the less you care about customers and the communities that you serve. And so when we see a company that sends an extraordinary amount of their profits upstream to the holding company, we grow concerned. So what we've seen is significant increases in price. And from the stories that CAC and others have heard over the last 20 years, questionable service at times. Matter of fact, we used to joke calling them intermittent power and light back in the day. And unfortunately, we can no longer use that clever name because of the new name change. But yeah, we're troubled by this pattern in Indiana of these energy holding companies buying our local utilities and getting farther and farther away from the customer. That seems to be what has occurred here in our city.
Thank you very much for clarifying that, Kerwin. And Jen, we'll dive back into a little bit more about the details of the rate hike itself, because CAC, as a consumer advocacy group, we're definitely concerned about the substantial increase that AES is asking for, but we're also concerned about how they want to charge customers for that increase. Can you walk us through how AES wants to recover this increase from customers?
Absolutely. So if AES gets its requested revenue increase, they have proposed various mechanisms by which to collect the revenue. So there are three major rate design elements that AES is going to put forward to try and collect this revenue. The biggest issue that we have flagged is the incredibly high fixed charge. This is the set amount that you pay every month, regardless of the amount of electricity you consume. So AES is proposing to raise that from $16.75 up to $25. This proposal would not only be the highest fixed charge in the state among the investor-owned electric utilities, but the second highest fixed charge of any investor-owned electric utility in the nation. So we are incredibly disappointed to see AES propose this really archaic way of collecting their increased revenue, and it really is about protecting their bottom line. And this means that no matter how much energy you conserve and how much you do to tighten your straps at home and tighten your belt at home, you will not be able to avoid that $25. It is there no matter what, unless you are disconnected from the company. For the second component, AES is really just trying to add insult to injury with declining block rates. Declining block rates are the variable volumetric based part of your bill. Typically, with this part of the bill, you can conserve energy, turn back your thermostat, and do the different things to try and get a hold and take control of your electric bill. And you can typically see this difference on your bill for this volumetric piece. Well, declining block rates turn that on its head, really. And for these declining block rates for volumetric rates, that means that you are charged more per unit of energy for using less. And those who use more get a discount. So as shown on this slide here, for the first 500 kilowatt hours that you use on your bill, you would get that at 13.2 cents. And then anything above that 500 kilowatt hour, it would be at 11.7 cents. We just think that's fundamentally unfair. Both of these archaic ways of designing your bill with a high fixed charge and with these declining block rates, it's really just trying to penalize those who use less energy, which are low-income households, which are senior citizens that are really trying to do anything they can to take control of their bill. And finally, they will be continuing various tracker mechanisms. Trackers are used primarily to tack things onto your bill outside of a rate case, but AES wants to continue many of those trackers or start them shortly after the rate case, so you won't get much lasting relief either. I did want to mention that most utilities offer a detailed bill, and you should call up AES customer service and ask for a detailed bill. Detailed bills will show you what you're paying for. What exactly is my fixed customer charge? What are my volumetric rates? What are the various trackers? So you can have a better idea and understand what you're paying for. So make sure you call up AES customer service and request that they start sending you a detailed bill, because it's important to understand exactly what you're paying for.
Absolutely, Jen. Thank you very much. We'll pivot back to Ben. AES is not proposing any specific programs for vulnerable low-income customers, but they are proposing bill discounts for large energy users and also asking for more profit for their shareholders. Walk us through what AES wants and who will pay for it.
Yeah, so, a lot of families right now in Indianapolis are struggling. They're facing inflation, they're facing stagnant wages, they're facing, many years of struggling to get by and difficulty paying their utility bills, including AES Indiana's bill. So we were really disappointed that as part of this rate case, we did not see any proposals from AES to help these folks that are struggling, these households that are struggling to make ends meet here in Indianapolis. Other utilities like NIPSCO and their rate case that they filed last year, they did have a low income proposal. Indiana American, the water company, has a rate case ongoing right now, and they had a low income proposal to help those customers out. But we saw nothing here from AES Indiana. Instead, what we saw was they're proposing not to give families that are struggling to get by a discount, but rather very big businesses, multinational corporations that want to expand their businesses here or move to Indiana. They want to give them really generous bill discounts, about 30% over a 5-year period. So that doesn't make any sense to us. Why should families that are struggling to get by get nothing, get no help, no meaningful help from the utility, and potentially be disconnected altogether, lose access to essential utility service? And then on the other hand, you have the utility wanting to subsidize these very large businesses that frankly don't need it. And guess who's going to be paying the cost of those subsidies? Well, AES Indiana doesn't want to say who exactly is going to pay those costs, that are going to run millions of dollars a year. But you can guess one way or another, they're going to end up back in our bills into the future. So, this proposal is fundamentally unfair, and it doesn't meaningfully address in any way, shape, or form the real struggles that Hoosier families are facing right now in our capital city.
Thank you very much, Ben. And Jen, yes, we'll talk more. AES has the highest disconnection rate in Indiana. Ben highlighted some of the challenges that folks go through when they're struggling to keep up with rising utility bills. What is AES doing about folks struggling to afford bills, if anything?
Sadly, they're just making it worse. As Ben mentioned, AES has no low income proposal to help those customers who are most vulnerable, those customers who have to choose between heating and eating and now cooling and eating, customers who have to forego necessary prescriptions to pay their utility bill. In the past, we were able to come to a compromise with AES for a pilot program. We knew that pilot program was going to fail. It was just the best that we could do with that current environment and trying to get the utility company geared up and starting to pay attention to its low income customers. And instead of learning from its mistakes with the pilot program and revising its program and putting forward one that would be successful, AES has just really stuck its head in the sand and is ignoring the needs of its customers and most vulnerable customers who are in dire need of some assistance. AES, their prior program was simply a modest donation from their shareholders to get it started. And then they had an enrollment, a roundup program. AES had a roundup program for their prior pilot. And as of February 2021, had a mere 116 residential accounts enrolled and opting in for recurring donations. That to me tells me that the company didn't do a lot to really try and seek enrollment and seek a steady, stable source of revenue to keep these programs funded and to keep people connected to power. And again, so instead of learning from its mistakes and proposing what's needed, which is a low income rate that has a steady source of funding, where we treat low income people as well as we do corporations, we instead have nothing. We have nothing from AES, no recognition of the terrible situation that their customers are in. And on top of that, they are adding salt to the wound with their higher disconnection fees and higher reconnection fees. And it really just customers, it's really kicking you when you're down. If you are disconnected for non-payment, you will get a charge for that. If you are reconnected after that, you are going to be charged for that. It's really just incredibly disappointing that AES is not doggedly pursuing relief for its customers before the commission and before the State House.
Thank you very much, Jen. And Kerwin, we'll hear from you. Folks have a chance to speak out about this proposed rate hike and many of the components of it that we've discussed here today. Can you tell us about the field hearings coming up?
Yeah, the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission has scheduled 2 field hearings in this rate case. Not enough for a large city like Indianapolis, but more than one. So that's good. The first field hearing is coming up next week on Thursday, August 24th. That one's at the public library, right in downtown Indianapolis on the bus line. So that's good. And then there's a hearing much later, a little odd, the separation between those 2 field hearings, but there'll be a field hearing on October 2nd up on the northwest side. I believe they had a field hearing there in the last rate case, a good location for a field hearing. But again, I just want to point out that there's a field hearing downtown, there's a field hearing on the northwest side, but a lot of the quadrants of the city, once again, are being left out from the opportunity to have a field hearing close to where they live and they go to school. So I would encourage folks, when you talk to your state legislators and talk to the commission, make sure you comment on the need for more scheduling of more field hearings, especially in these rate cases, to give the public the opportunity to participate and have their voices heard. And these rate case hearings are incredibly important. First, I would note that we've seen better outcomes in rate cases when there's been robust public participation at a field hearing where the commission has to sit there and listen to the day-to-day struggles of folks struggling to get by. Compelling narratives, especially from seniors and other folks on fixed incomes, talking about how they simply cannot afford, as we discussed earlier, an additional $23 a month from their budgets, especially those on fixed incomes and Social Securities and other things. But it's also important because, as Jen discussed in her discussion about a rate case, the commission is duty bound, if you will, by making the findings in their order and their decision making by the evidence of record, if you will. And so the testimony at field hearings becomes evidence in that case that the commission at least has to consider when making those decisions. These bodies, these governmental bodies, these quasi-judicial bodies that make these regulatory decisions have an evidence of record that's placed before them, and that's the primary thing they use to make their decisions. So it is critically important that the public participate in these hearings, make their voices heard, express their concerns. If you can't participate in person, send your comments in writing to the OUCC and get the word out, because it's critically important that the public participate, because we'll get a better outcome, and they need to hear your stories, because the IURC is duty bound also to equally represent the interests of utilities with the interests of customers. And they hear from the utility companies all the time about their financial health and their debt ratings and their credit ratings and all that stuff. And so they need to hear the other side of the coin, because customers simply can't afford their bills right now. And that's what the commission needs to hear.
Thank you so much, Kerwin. And just to echo that, yes, your voice matters and it can make a difference. And it's so important that you speak out, because like Kerwin said, they're hearing from the utilities. Jen mentioned a few other big players that engage in these cases. They got fancy lawyers. They are making their needs well known. And that's why it's so important that we all come together to speak up and show up at the field hearings if you can. Like Kerwin said, submit written comments if you can. Here at CAC, we know life is busy, so we make it really easy to submit written comments in this case. We've got an action link that'll help you submit a written comment to the Office of Utility Consumer Counselor. It's that act.cidact.org/HZAPVFE. And we've got ways to take action on our website, on our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can find us on social media. Please take action, and please tell everybody you know here in Indianapolis to take action too, because again, our voices are stronger when we stand together. So thank you all so much for joining us here today for the Q&A. We sincerely appreciate your time, and we hope to see you at those field hearings coming on up. Thanks so much.